Okay, lesson 7 gets pretty exciting in my opinion. What we're doing is we're going to be focusing on learning how to sort of animate these sprites. So in, I believe, lesson 6, we talked about how to kind of create the sprite and code that to our program. Now we're going to be introduced to animating the sprites. So hopefully you guys had a chance to watch the video where you guys saw a flipbook, and that's sort of what we're doing, or we're going to get to. Today we're just being introduced to it, and to do that, what we're doing is we looked at the code for the draw loop in number 4 in circle 4, and we're going to go ahead and start putting into practice in puzzle 5. And what we're being asked to do is we're kind of asked to just draw random circles of orange and green. Okay, so this doesn't play. I'm not sure why this doesn't. What we're going to do is we're going to just create a program that has random orange and green circles. So if we play this, we're going to notice that there's only green circles. And hopefully you had a chance to look at why that's the case. And we're going to notice the reason for that is because there's no code for orange circles. We only have green circles. Okay, right here we have the draw function. We have a green, we're choosing the color green, that's the fill, and then we're creating circles. Okay, and hopefully we remember that when we talk about the circle, we have 4 values. Let me get to it. We have the x value of the where the circle is placed, the y value. We have the width and the height of the circle, or ellipse. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the fill because we want to choose an orange circle now, and we're going to type in orange. And then we're going to create the circle with the ellipse function or code. And again, the 200 and 200 means that we're placing in the middle. If I run this, I'm just placing a circle in the middle. We'll talk about the size in just a second also. But we don't want it in the middle, we want it randomly. Okay, we want the x and y at random locations. So I'm going to use the random number. I'm going to choose between 0 and 400. And the reason for that, if you guys remember, the grid is 400 wide and 400 long. Okay, so that's why we're choosing between 0 and 400. Now if I only do this, we're only going to be changing the x value of the circle, the orange circle. We want to change the y value as well, so we're going to have to do it again and place in the y value slot, and again between 0 and 400. Okay, I'm going to run it. I know the size is off, we'll fix it in a second, but if we run it, I guess it's hard to see, the circle is going to be randomly generated at different places. And to get rid of the size value, I'm just going to delete this and run it. Oops. And we're just going to get rid of this. That kind of tells us we're getting rid of the width and height. And we're going to notice we have the random generator. Okay, so just wanted to clarify that the circles aren't going to look exactly like this. We're just randomly creating circles. Okay, now that that's done, you're going to cover a few more things, specifically the sprite properties, and it's going to look very overwhelming. Okay, on number 8, it kind of talks about the different codes. You're going to work on it one by one, but I wanted to go ahead and do the number 12, and this is going to be where you continue your code from before. Whoops. Again, and my code, remember I had the happy face before? Here I'm making the happy face move. Okay, and I really want to stress the importance of how your work or your code should be organized. So again, it looks very overwhelming at first, but I'm going to break it down to 3 different parts. Okay, and this I believe is going to help us understand I guess how the code is organized. This first part is just, and I put a comment here, the gray with the 2 slashes just means it's a comment. It doesn't affect the code at all. This first section is just the frames per second. In other words, this is just how quickly the animation is going to move. Okay, so that's the first part. It's simply this one code, world.framerate equals, and then how quickly the frame rate is going to be. If you don't have this, it's going to default to 30 frames per second. Here I wanted to slow it down. I'll show you what it looks like when I actually change it to 30 frames per second. So this is what it looks like now. It's 5 frames, so every second it changes 5 times. The default is 30, so every second it's going to actually change 30 times. Okay, so much faster. Okay, so the reason I slowed it down or lowered the value is to make sure it slows down so I could sort of see where it moves. Okay, so that's the first part, and you'll learn about that. I can't remember which number, but you'll learn about that in one of these other circles. The next thing we're going to go over is this is what you guys learned in lesson 6. This is where you create your sprite. This is where you create and assign the sprite. Okay, so this is what we learned in lesson 6, where you set the variable. Remember, you talked about, or you created, or you used an animation. Either you uploaded one or you just simply drew it. And then you assign the variable. In this case, I assigned the variable happy face. By default, I believe they just kind of say sprite 1 and sprite 2, but I do like to be more specific, so it helps me stay organized. All right, so that's number 2. 1 is new, 2 is from lesson 6, and this is the bulky part that might be confusing. So this is kind of what we're learning, and this is really the draw function. So number 3 is the draw function. And I broke it down to 2 parts. Notice that this first part, the text is staying the same, right? If we notice up here, the text doesn't change. The text just stays at one place. And that's because I use constant values, meaning, you know, when I made this green grass here, I just told it to be at 0,300 and kept the size the same. The text is going to be 24-point font. And then here the text is going to be yay, we're all good. And it stays at 100, 150. Okay. Now what changes is the happy face. And that's because we used the random number generator. The rotation, if you notice, I'm going to slow down even more to make it more obvious. If we notice the rotation, the happy face kind of rotates, and that's, I think, number 9, I believe, where you learn about the rotation, or 10. So I have the rotation. I also have the X value changing here. The X value is a random number between 25, which is here, I believe. Oh, no, here. And 375. So it's all almost in this entire range. Okay, so lesson 7 is bulky. It's going to look overwhelming at first, but if you really do break it down to these 3 parts, I think it's going to make a lot more sense.